Hey friends, it's that time once again for Ministry to Muslims live stream training. So we're going to be equipping you today with a couple of different segments, so stay tuned for a while if you can. We are going to, let me first announce that if you're one of those that like to set out on your calendar several months in advance, our Strong Tower Conference in Southern California is going to be September 13th through 15th. That's a Friday through Sunday. So put that on your calendars now and invite a friend as well. So we're going to have tonight a great topic to start with, and that's going to be evidence for Christianity outside of the Bible. Of course, we know the Bible is a set of documents that stand reliable enough, but in addition to that, there is evidence outside the Bible for Christianity. We're going to get into that, and so we're going to bring on our guest. If we can get him on the screen. I'm not controlling that, so let's get him on there. He is. Samuel Green, coming to us from down under. And
hello, Eric.
Good, Samuel. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thank you, and it's nice to be with everyone.
Excellent. All right. So Samuel is a longtime partner with the ministry. He's been engaging with Muslims for a long time. And speaking of engaging with Muslims, so his website is engagingwithislam.org. Go ahead, check that out. Check out his YouTube page, Samuel Green. And what else? Anything you need to tell us, Samuel, as far as upcoming events you're doing?
No, I'm just I'm planning to be at the Strong Tower conference that you mentioned before, and so I'm in the process of booking flights and various things with my calendar as well.
Excellent. Good. He was with us a couple years ago there, and we'll be happy to see you there again this year. All right, I'm going to step aside. I'm going to let you take over, Samuel, and if you have questions, put them in the chat. We'll try and get to them as time allows. Like I said, we have 2 segments tonight, so we'll do what we can, but take your time, Samuel, as much as you need to go ahead and get through this topic. All right?
Sure. Thank you, Eric.
Here we go.
Well, it's great to be with everyone today, and the topic that I want to think about is history outside of the Bible and how it intersects and confirms or goes against the Bible. And so to think about that topic now, why am I wanting to do that? Well, it's because of what the Bible claims itself, what God claims himself in the Bible, and that is that the true God acts in history. The true God acts in history. When God created the world, that's a historical event. When God acted with Abraham, with Noah, with Jesus, throughout all these times, God's history with Israel, the Bible is claiming that these are real events. Now, there are, apocalyptic visions in the Bible. There is poetry and psalms in the Bible. So there are different genres of writing, but the narratives of the Bible, overwhelmingly, if not all, there may be some that's got some poetry connected into it, but overwhelmingly, what you get in the Bible is that the narratives are claiming to be real history. That's just what they claim. And so if it's real history with real people in real places, then we may hear about these people outside of the Bible. And that's what I want to look at today. I want to say, if we go outside of the Bible, what do we find? Now, I'm not claiming to be original on this, and so I'm just going to give you a couple of books to start off with. So this is a great one by an Australian scholar, Paul Barnett. Dr. Paul Barnett, Is the New Testament History? And another one by another great Australian scholar, John Dixon, The Christ Files. And so you can see how historians know what they know about Jesus. These are 2 great books. There are many other books, but these are ones that are easily accessible and written well. There's also books like this one, The Archaeology of the Bible, and I'll be referring to a couple of things from this later on. So again, I'm not claiming to to done this research myself, but what I do is gather it together and hopefully make you aware of it through this video. And so, you know, having one of those books would be a great thing that you could share with someone to show them the reliability and to confirm what we have in the gospel, to confirm the Bible for them. So I'm going to begin with, first of all, some documents outside of the Bible. So there's two types of ways that we can do this history. There's written documents, and I'm going to be looking at one at the moment by a man named Josephus, who writes at the end of the 1st century. And so we can read written documents which were written around that time by people in that area and see what they have to say. But then we've also got archaeological evidence, and that's like stones and inscriptions and in things like that, which are different to written documents in that they're not written and copied and passed on. They're just buried in the sands and then someone digs them up. And so they're sort of our two ways that we can get history. So I'm going to, as I said, begin with the written documents, and I'm going to give a couple of quotes from Josephus. Now, Josephus was one of the generals who was involved in the Jewish war against Rome. And the Jews lost, they surrendered, and Josephus, as part of his terms of surrender and everything, he wrote up this history to defend Israel and to give a history of Israel. And what's interesting is that because he's writing at the late 1st century from Jerusalem, so he's someone who's in Jerusalem, so he's in that area of Jesus, in the same time frame as Jesus, just decades after Jesus, but he's alive around that time. We actually find 3 significant references of interest to us. And so I'm going to go through these now. So, Eric, if you can please share my screen, my slides. Here we go. And I'm using a quote here that there are 2 different readings of this quote about Jesus, and I'm taking one from an Arabic quote, which I may explain later on. And so anyway, this is what Josephus, he's a Jewish historian, general, not a Christian, and this is what he writes towards the end of the 1st century. At this time, there was a wise man who was called Jesus, and his conduct was good, and he was known to be virtuous. And many people from among the Jews and from the other nations became his disciples. Pilate condemned him to be crucified and to die. And those who became his disciples did not abandon his discipleship. They reported that he appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion and that he was alive. Accordingly, he was perhaps the Messiah, of whom the prophets have recounted wonders. Now, that's an interesting quote about Jesus, isn't it? From this Jewish historian who's not a Christian. You can see that he doesn't personally accept Jesus as the Messiah, but he talks about Jesus, the area in which he lived, the manner of his death, what his disciples were saying about him. And again, he's talking about the Jerusalem area. And so there's a lot of confirmation there that we get from outside of the Bible to Jesus and what people were saying to Jesus by the end of the 1st century. We'll go down to the next slide over here. So he, that is King Agrippa, assembled the Sanhedrin of judges and brought before them the brother of Jesus, who is called Christ, whose name was James. And so here we have a reference to Jesus' brother, James, who was the first leader after Jesus of the Jerusalem church. And what we actually find is that King Agrippa, in order to please the Jews, and I didn't give all the quote here, maybe I should have, he has James killed. And so the way that we actually only know about the death of James is from Josephus. And it's interesting, if you get, where is it? Where's my, even if you get Eusebius and his ecclesiastical history, which is our main surviving church history, Eusebius himself refers to Josephus to tell us about James. And so here we have a statement about Jesus' brother, And what are we told? That it's James. Well, we know that from the Bible. We also know that Jesus, who is called Christ, and so the Jesus that Josephus wants us to know that he's referring to, because Jesus is a common name, he says it's the Jesus who is called Christ. And so, again, it's just a little historical piece of information that Josephus has recorded for us, but it confirms what we have in the Bible, doesn't it? Again, this is written by someone who's not a Christian, and he's just recording that there is a man called Jesus who's called the Christ, and he's got a brother, James, and he recounts for us how James was accused of breaking the law and was stoned to death. Now, we'll keep reading. Now, some of the Jews thought that the destruction of Herod's army came from God, and that very justly, as a punishment of what he did against John, that was called the Baptist. For Herod slew him, who was a good man, and commanded the Jews to exercise virtue, both as righteousness towards one another and piety towards God, and so to come to baptism. So here we see John the Baptist being mentioned outside of the Bible. Again, these are not Christian. Josephus is not a Christian here. But John the Baptist, the brother of Jesus, and Jesus were well-known figures in Israel in this first century. And so he writes something about each of them. And so you can see here that John, we're told his name is John. We're told that he's called the Baptist. Well, that's what we have in the Bible. We see that Herod had him killed. Well, that's what we have in the gospel accounts. We see that John commanded the Jews to virtue and to come to baptism. You can see that this is confirming what we have in the Bible here. Now, I just remembered, hang on, is there another one? Let me just check down here. Oops. I haven't included this, but I'm going to just mention it. There's another excellent confirmation that Josephus gives us, and that is of the death of Herod. And so in the book of Acts, we read about Herod coming out wearing coming out, and the people of Tyre and Sidon saying to him, you are a god for us, you are a god. And he doesn't rebuke them. And so God strikes him down. We even get that in Josephus. It even talks about Herod coming out, and it actually gives us details that the Bible doesn't give us, that Herod was wearing a silver suit, a woven in silver, and it shone out. And so that's why everyone called out and called him a god impiously. And so it gives us even the death of Herod at the very moment that he's receiving praise of being God. And so we even have that event. Sorry, I didn't put that in there. I've got a lot of material and I forgot to put that one in. I just remembered. So you've even got that. Now, I'm going to look at some Jewish religious sources now. So I've looked at a non-Christian Jewish historian. What I want to do now is to look at the Jewish religious sources. And so this is from what's called the Talmud. And so here's a couple of references. Yeshua had 5 disciples: Mattai, Nakkai, Netza, Buni, and Toda. And so you can see where that's from. Now, you can see there that it's referring to Jesus and his disciples. It says he has 5 disciples. It doesn't mention the 12 in the way that we would, but you wouldn't expect it to, as it's an outsider, talking about another religion, but it's talking about his disciples. And maybe the first one's Matthew, how those names line up to the Greek version of the names, we'd have to do a bit of work, but it's talking about Jesus and his disciples. The next one is about Jesus' death. Yeshua was hanged on the Passover Eve. Now that's what we have in the Bible, isn't it? 40 days previously, the herald had cried out, he is being led out for stoning because he has practiced sorcery and led Israel astray and enticed them to apostasy. Whosoever has anything to say in his defense, let him come forward and declare it. As nothing was brought forward in his defense, he was hanged on Passover Eve. Now, hanging is the way to talk about crucifixion because you're hung on the cross. It's a little bit different for us where it says 40 days previously, the herald speaks about what's going to happen to Jesus. This may be what's referred to in John's gospel, where it says that the decision had already been made and they were just now looking for the opportunity to arrest him. So it actually may fit in better than may first appear. And you can see that Jesus is being accused of sorcery. And so that's what they were saying. You know, he casts out demons by Beelzebub. He heals by evil spirits. You know, it's that type of thing. And so this is actually testifying to Jesus doing miraculous events. But of course, they're giving Jesus a different motive, a different origin for the magic that he's doing. They're saying it's not the working of God, it's magic and it's evil. But it's still testifying that he was known for doing these miraculous things. So that's quite interesting too, isn't it? And I'm trying to give you I'm giving you every reference. It's not that there's contrary ones that I'm not going to show. I am actually, trying to give them all out. Now, what I'm going to do now is to move a little bit later in history, still quite early, still only around 110, because what we know is that the Romans begin to persecute the Christians. And so we have in the early Roman histories from around the time of Jesus and that time after him, we have the Romans writing about the Christians. And so what I'm going to do now is to bring up every reference we have that the Romans have left us about the Christians. So the first one is from the Roman historian Tacitus, which is one of the standard histories of Rome. He writes, Christians derive their name from a man named Christ, who during the reign of Emperor Tiberius had been executed by the sentence of the procurator Pontius Pilate. The deadly superstition, thus checked for the moment, broke out afresh not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but also in the city of Rome. So here we have Tacitus, a Roman historian, and he's writing what is known about the Christians. We're not exactly sure of his source at this stage. We might be getting some idea in the next quote, but you can see that he talks about Christians getting their name from Christ. He talks about Pontius Pilate and the execution of Jesus, and also the location where it began in Judea, and that it has spread to Rome. Now that all confirms what we have in the Bible and the early history that we understand. I'll keep going. Let's go to the next one. This is by a man named Suetonius. And again, he's writing, about 90 years after Jesus. And this one here is actually just confirming something that we find in the book of Acts. And this little quote is very important because it helps us, it contributes significantly to dating Paul's letters. So what we have here is Suetonius writes about the Emperor Claudius, and he says, Claudius expelled the Jews from Rome in AD 49 because of the riots they were causing at the instigation of Christus. Now, Christus seems to be an incorrect way of saying Christ, okay? And if you know your Bibles, you'll know that Aquila and Priscilla leave Rome because Claudius expelled the Jews from Rome. And so that's why Priscilla and Aquila leave Rome and come and join Paul. Now, what that means is that this little reference, which we can date, from the Roman histories to AD 49, helps us to know in the book of Acts exactly the time when Aquila and Priscilla met with Paul. And then we can use that, we've now got that fixed at 49, AD 49, and then we can use that for the dating of Paul's other letters and everything else, because we've now got, a date within the book of Acts. There are other dates that we can get, but this is one of them. And so I hope you can see this is how Christians date the letters of Paul. It's through these statements that they get from outside of the Bible with dates, which allow them to do their work. So I will go to the next one. Now, the next one is from Pliny the Younger. And so he's a governor governor of Pontus and Bithynia. And we read about that in Peter's letter in 1 Peter, don't we? He begins by talking about the Christians in Pontus and Bithynia. And so here is the ruler, the Roman ruler over this time, over this region, and he's writing around the year, 111. So it's, what do we learn when we read from this governor? And so he is writing to the emperor. So he's a Roman governor writing to the Emperor Trajan. And so I'm going to read this letter out. It might take a little while because he actually writes a lot about the Christians. And so you can see that they're taking up plenty of space in the Roman discussions. And let's read it. Pliny to the Emperor Trajan. It is my practice, my lord, to refer to you all the matters concerning which I am in doubt. For who can better give guidance to my hesitation or inform my ignorance? I have never participated in trials of Christians. I therefore do not know what offences it is the practice, what the offences are, and what practice and punishment they should be, and to what extent. And I have been not a little hesitant as to whether there should be any distinction on account of age, or no difference between the very young and the more mature, whether pardon is to be granted for repentance, or if a man has once been a Christian, it does him no good to have ceased to be one, whether the name itself, even without offences, or only the offences associated with the name are to be punished. So you can see he's writing to an emperor here. Meanwhile, in the case of those who were denounced to me, so there are people who are saying, these people are Christians, these are Christians, and they're dobbing them in as Christians. I have observed the following procedure. I interrogated those as to whether they were Christians. Those who confessed, I interrogated a second and third time, threatening them with punishment. Those who persisted, I ordered executed. Right? It's pretty harsh here. For I had no doubt that, whether the nature of their creed, stubbornness, and inflexible obstinacy surely deserve to be punished. So even if they haven't done anything wrong, the fact that they're saying, I'm a Christian and that's how it is, that they die for this. There were others possessed of the same folly, but because they were Roman citizens, I signed an order for them to be transferred to Rome. Now, that's what happened to Paul, isn't it, in the book of Acts? So again, that's confirming the procedure of the Romans and what they did with the book, what they did with Paul. Soon accusations spread, as usually happens. So what this means is, as some Christians are being reported and dobbed in, exposed to the government, then other people who aren't Christian are taking advantage of this. You can imagine if your neighbor was a Christian and you wanted his house, you hand him over to authorities, you might be able to get his house. This actually happened quite a lot in the Islamic period as well. But anyway, soon accusations spread, as usually happens, because of the proceedings going on, and several incidents occurred. An anonymous document was published containing the names of many persons. So someone's come to Pliny the Younger with a sheet of paper with all these Christians' names on it, but they haven't signed it. They've just given it to him. And so you can see how Christians are being reported on here. Those who denied that they were or had been Christians when they evoked the gods in words dictated by me, so they confessed the gods of Rome, offered prayer with incense and wine to your image, which I had ordered to be brought in for this purpose together, with statues of the gods, and moreover cursed Christ, none of which those who were really Christian, it is said, can be forced to do so. These I thought should be discharged. Okay, so in other words, he's got a list of names of these Christians. It's anonymous, but he brings them in and they are Christian. He sets up an image of Trajan, of the emperor. He sets up the images of the gods, and he says to these people, pray to them, worship them, curse Christ. And for those who do that, they're released, they're discharged. Others named by the informer declared that they were Christian, but then denied it, asserting that they had been, but had ceased to be some 3 years before. Others many years, some as much as 25 years. They all worshipped your image and the statutes of the gods and cursed Christ. So you can see that it's been there for quite a while, and you can see the pressure that the Christians are under here. Okay. This is the last one now. They asserted, moreover, that the sum... So this is the Christians now. They assert, however, that the sum and substance of their fault or error had been that they were accustomed to meet on a fixed day before dawn and sing responsively a hymn to Christ as to God, and to bind themselves by oath not to some crime, not to do some crime, but not to commit fraud, theft, or adultery, nor falsify their trust, nor to refuse to return a trust when called upon to do so. When this was over, it was their custom to depart and to assemble again to partake of food, but ordinary and innocent food. Even this, they affirm, they had ceased to do after my edict, by which, in accordance with your instructions, I had forbidden political associations. So in other words, he's saying that the Christians meet together, they pray, that they sing to Christ as a God. So that's interesting, isn't it? Within these very early centuries, early decades of Christianity, we've got Romans saying Christ is being recognized as a God. And then he talks about them having ordinary food, but then they've stopped meeting together for their communal meal because there's been this ban on political association, and so they're not doing that. Accordingly, I judged it all the more necessary to find out what the truth was by torturing 2 female slaves who were called deaconesses. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? So you've got Christianity among the slave class, you've got female deacons, and he's torturing them to find out, what it is they do. And so he's actually telling us how he's got this information that he's just given us, that he's been torturing these deaconesses. But I discovered nothing else but depraved, excessive superstition. And so that's just probably, telling the Christian story. And he's saying, well, that's not political. That's just their beliefs. Now, that was an extended reading, but I think it's worthwhile because that's the discussion between a Roman governor to the emperor saying, what do I do with these Christians? And this is the types of things they do. And this, so it's very interesting. But again, all of that confirms the types of things that we believe as Christians, isn't it? It's not that, the story about Christians being persecuted by Rome and Roman citizens being treated differently that we read in the book of Acts. It's not that that's all made up. We can see it outside of the Bible. Now, we've also got Lucian of Samosata. Now, this is very early. He's writing AD 73. So this is very early, and this is just after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Now, what he does is he doesn't mention Jesus by name, but most scholars think that he is referring to Jesus, and we'll see why. And so he's talking about the futility of, he's sort of a philosopher, and he's talking about how the nations of the world kill their great men, right? They kill their great men. And so in this, it's believed that he's referring to Jesus, though he doesn't mention Jesus by name, but you'll see why we think it is Jesus. Now, what else can we say? When the wise are forcibly dragged off by tyrants, their wisdom is captured by insults, and their minds are oppressed and without defense. What advantage did the Athenians gain from murdering Socrates? Famine and plague came upon them as a punishment for their crime. What advantage did the men of Samos gain by burning Pythagoras? In a moment, their land was covered with sand. What advantage did the Jews gain from executing their wise king? It was just after that their kingdom was abolished. God justly avenged these three wise men. The Athenians died of hunger. The Samians were overwhelmed by the sea, and the Jews desolate and driven from their own kingdom. And so I'll just finish there. And I'll keep going. But Socrates, whoops, hang on. No, sorry. No, I still want the slide, Eric. I still want the slide. I was talking about the quote. Thank you. Sorry about that. But Socrates is not dead because of Plato. Neither is Pythagoras because of the statue of Juno, nor is the wise king because of the new law he laid down. And so you see here, we've got this very early reference, AD 73, to the wise king that the Jews killed, that brought about the destruction of the temple, and that this king brought a new law. Now, it's only really Jesus who fits that. It doesn't say Jesus' name, but the scholars say this is, an indirect way of referring to Jesus. So let's see if I've got any others here. Now, how am I going for time? I'm just doing the Old Testament at this time. I'll just give a general statement here. So professional historians, regardless of their religious persuasion, treat the New Testament and its portrait of Jesus far more seriously than the general public realizes. So this is a quote from Dr. John Dixon in this book here, The Christ Files. And this is one of those things where, we can watch our secular media and they just dismiss Christianity as being unhistorical and everything else. But that's not what historians do. Right? When you go to the historical departments of universities, they take the New Testament seriously and they engage with it historically. Let me just go over here. I'm going to do this very quickly now. This is E.P. Sanders. He wrote The Historical Figure of Jesus, and it's one of your secular, not hostile secular, but it's not a Christian account of Jesus' life using the historical sources that we have. And he says, I shall first offer a list of statements about Jesus that meet two standards. They are almost beyond dispute, and they belong to the framework of his life, and especially his public career. A list of everything that we know about Jesus would be appreciatively longer. So here's a guy, he's a scholar, he's not writing as a Christian, but he's saying this is what is, these are beyond dispute. Right, what I'm going to say here. So, what do secular historians say is beyond dispute with Jesus? Okay, he's born around 4 BC, near the time of Herod's death. He spent his childhood and early years in Nazareth, a Galilee village. He was baptized by John the Baptist. He called disciples. He taught in the towns, villages, and countryside. He preached the kingdom of God. About the year 30, he went to Jerusalem for the Passover. He created a disturbance in the temple area. He had a final meal with his disciples. He was arrested and interrogated by Jewish authorities, specifically the high priest. He was executed on the orders of the Roman prefect, Pontius Pilate. We may add here a short list of equally secure facts about the aftermath of Jesus' life. His disciples at first fled. They saw him, in what sense is not certain, after his death. Now remember, this is a secular historian writing here, and he's saying from the evidence we have, the disciples saw him, right? As a secular historian, he's not going to say how that happened, but he's going to say they did see him, and as a consequence, they believed that he would return to found the kingdom of God. They formed a community to wait for his return and sought to win others to the faith in him as God's Messiah. Now, that's a pretty good list of things that secular historians, non-Christian historians would say are without doubt. These are things that they would say is historically certain, as much as you can be certain about history. So again, I just want people to realize that historians take the Bible seriously, and they take the life of Jesus seriously, and the things that they say they can be confident about Jesus' life are the things that we would agree with. Okay. I won't read that one. What I want to do now is, because I think I'll take up my full hour, and I want to leave 15 minutes for questions. I just want to share with you now some photos of my visit to the British Museum. So if any of you go to London at any stage, you want to go to the British Library and look at the ancient Bibles they've got there. So these are the, I think it's the Codex Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. No, not Vaticanus, it's Alexandrinus. And so you've got the most ancient complete Bibles at the British Library. So you've got to go there. Lots of other interesting things by interesting famous people as well. So the British Library, but you also want to go to the British Museum. Okay, get there early in the morning because there's a massive crowd every day because it's just amazing. But what I did was I went around taking photos, and our brother Jay Smith has a DVD set. I don't know if it's online, but he's got a DVD set. I don't know if people have DVDs anymore. I still do. And he goes around and does a tour of the British Museum and looks at all the points that it touches on the Bible. And I've taken my own photos, and I'm going to just share those with you now, just very briefly. So, first of all, these are the types of things you will see in the British Museum. This is an ancient stone written by King Nebuchadnezzar, and it's actually recording him building Babylon. And so this is, with Daniel. This is the time of Daniel. And so it's talking about the people and the places that we read about in Daniel. And we've actually got the original stone that King Nebuchadnezzar had made. This is not a copy. This is the original. This next one, it's called the Taylor Prism. Let me just read it to you. A 6-sided clay prism lists the campaigns of the Assyrian king Sennacherib. Now, if you're a Bible reader, you should know Sennacherib from his ascension in 705 BC until his final war against Babylon. Now, look at this. It itemizes tribute from Hezekiah, king of Judah, in 701 BC. So here we have the Assyrian king Sennacherib, and he's giving a history. He's had a scribe write this 6-sided prism to recount all of his military battles, and he talks about coming against Hezekiah and how he made Hezekiah pay certain tribute. Now, they're all the people that we know about, isn't it, from the book of Kings and Chronicles, and how Hezekiah stopped paying the tribute and the consequences that came from that. Now, this is the Assyrians as well, and this is spectacular. This has all these pictures that the Assyrians carved in stone, and I guess it was like a huge storytelling place where you could go along and see these large stone carvings, which were the different places where the kings of Assyria had fought their enemies, and so there's really interesting things there. There's actually a picture, or maybe I might include it in the next one, where it's got men swimming naked in the water to go and fight people, and they've got underwater breathing equipment. It's most likely animals' organs, and they've pumped them up with air, and they've got them in their mouths, and they're swimming. So it's like scuba divers, right? So you don't often think of the Assyrians as scuba divers, but people had ancient ways of going underwater and breathing back then. Anyway, so you got these amazing pictures and these carvings, but what are they of? Well, they're actually of the capture of Lachish. And so you can see here, most of the sculptures in this room belong to a single series showing the capture of Lachish by the Assyrian king Sennacherib in 701 BC. Lachish was one of the chief cities of the kingdom of Judah, and there are references to Sennacherib's invasion in the Bible. Now, the other picture over there, it's a bit too small, so I can't read it out, but it actually tells you where in the Bible, it is, so it says 2 kings, and it gives you the reference. And this is the thing you find in the British Museum. As you go around, you often see references to the Bible, like Bible and, the actual quote, 2 Kings 15, whatever it might be. As you go around, you see the Bible referred to. Now, this is a stele. It's called a stele. And I don't know if you can see it, but right there's a man bowing down and, sort of bowing down in front of this king. Now, we're told who this person is. So this is the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III. So Shalmaneser, holding a bowl, receives tribute from Susa and Gilzanian. He faces his field marshal and another official. So Shalmaneser, beneath a parasol, accepts the tribute of Laua. Laua. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. I'm not sure. No, it might be an I there, of the house of Humri. This is King Jehu of Israel, who appears in the Bible in 2 Kings 9 and 10. Now, what's interesting is that you've got the king mentioned in 2 Kings and what he's doing, and here we actually have the king that he's bowing down to with his own record of the account of the time that Jehu came from Israel and paid tribute to him. Okay. Now, this is Jehoiachin. So this is another king of Israel. You can see how the kings of Israel were on the world stage and interacting with the major superpowers around them. And so I'm just going to go through these last ones really quick now, but this is Jehoiachin. We read about him in 2 Kings 25. You can see how it's got the reference in the Bible there, 2 Kings 25, and it actually tells you the daily rations that he was given. So Jehoiachin surrenders to Nebuchadnezzar, and we read about Nebuchadnezzar taking him to Babylon and treating him well and giving him, rations, monthly rations. And we've actually got the stone telling us what the rations were that the king of Israel was receiving from the king of Babylon. Okay. So I'm not going to read that now because I want to finish up in time, but you could stop the video if you're looking at it at another time. But this is all just about that king. Now, this is an interesting one. This is just a small little clay tablet that they have. And you can see it's written in cuneiform, which was the script at that time. And I've given you the link for the British Museum, and it'd be good for me to redo this and go through and get the link for on each British museum's URL for each object. I don't have them, but I'm sure you could get them. But with that little clay tablet, this is what it says. The clay tablet with 6 and 1 and 4 lines of inscription. That means probably on the different sides, different number of lines on each side. It's late Babylonian. It's an administrative one. It's just, within Babylonian administration. The tablet gives the name and title of a high-ranking Babylonian official who, according to Jeremiah 39, was present at the historic siege of Jerusalem in 587 BC with King Nebuchadnezzar II himself. Now, what's interesting here is, you've got the big names of the kings, so you've got Nebuchadnezzar and Jehoiachin and Jehu, and, you've got the names of the kings. But what we've got here is just an administrative letter, so it's just, it's a letter between a minor official and the government, right? A minor official and the king. And so we've actually got the name of this minor official who's involved with the siege, and it matches up perfectly with the name that we have in Jeremiah 39, where it talks about this king and it gives his this official, and it gives his name. We've actually got this official in the correspondence with the king himself. And so it's just showing that even the names in the Bible are true. Anyway, so there they are there. I'm going to finish up there. So that gives us 15 minutes for Q&A. So I hope you found that helpful. Eric.
All right. Thank you, Samuel. And it's fair to say that there's obviously archaeological evidence from the New Testament times as well, right? That you didn't include.
There is. I just had a friend come back from church, from a visit to Turkey. And when he was in, I think it was in Turkey, he went to the site, and I have this photo. In the book of Romans, at the end of Romans, it talks about the engineer in this city who is helping Paul in some way. I can't remember the exact phrase now, but it gives the name of this man, and he's like the city engineer, the building engineer for the city. And we've actually got his exact name on a stone in that city because he was the engineer. You know, his name gets put around the place because he builds things. And so, yeah, I can do the same thing for the New Testament, just little incidental things. And again, you know, even with that one of that guy from Romans, the book of Romans, you know, he's an incidental one line in the book of Romans, you know, but we can even get references for him. So, yes, it's the New Testament as well.
All right. Well, great stuff. And just keep in mind, y'all, that the information is not limited to what Samuel just presented here, again, because he showed a few books that are written on the topic. So the evidence is plentiful on this. Yeah, not just on archaeology, but on this entire topic. Yes. And the references. And like he said, there hasn't been any documents that, like, no one contradict what Tacitus or Suetonius has said on the topic, right?
No, exactly.
Contemporaries.
Yes. Okay. And so, look, I just want to restate what I said at the beginning, and that was, you know, when the Bible is putting forward a narrative and saying to us, this happened, from the evidence we have outside, it happened, right? Our God works in history. He's not just a philosophical idea. It's God, you know, it's God working in real historical events, that when we check outside of history, we see the footprint of that event outside of the Bible.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's see if we have any questions. Again, I'm not putting these up, so hopefully we've got, there we go. All right. Houston Ewer says, are there also confirmed mentions of Jesus in the Jewish Talmud?
Yes. Now, hello, Houston. I did show some of those at the beginning. And so, yes, I gave two of Jesus in the Talmud. There's one where it says that Yeshua had 5 disciples, and it gives some names. And then there was the other one which spoke about him and the manner of his death and the timing of his death and all that. So that was more at the beginning. So
yeah, if you did miss any of this, go back and start from the beginning, and
you'll find
45 minutes. Mm-hmm. Karen, hello. She asks, have they increased security at the British Museum, given that Muslims have been known to destroy churches, scriptures, evidences of Christianity?
They have security guards everywhere, and things are behind very secure glass panels. So they do take that seriously. I don't know of any references to Muslims wanting to destroy this, for those reasons. I guess when it comes to Islam, the contrast would be that the events that we find in the Quran just are not corroborated by general history. That's what I'd say there.
Thank you. Let's see what else we have. Yep. We like your teaching. Another thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. I guess I'm going to be passing the baton now to George.
No problem. I guess there's no other questions. But thank you so much, brother. And Samuel will be with us, Lord willing, at our Strong Tower East Coast, not West Coast, this year. That will be in the end of the last day of May 31st and June 1st and June 2nd. And also, he will be joining us in Minnesota in June 13 to the 18th, Lord willing, where he will be teaching the entire conference. He will be the main guy that doing all the teaching almost, and also he will be participating in some outreaches with us as well in Minnesota. If you'd like to join us, we would love to have you. Let us know. Eric, thank you so much, brother. And Lord willing, Samuel, do you have an idea what next month is? It a continuous of what?
I was thinking next month of looking at how we date the New Testament, and I wanted to look at, you know how you'll hear people say Matthew didn't write his gospel till 90 AD, and you hear those types of things, and it's pretty hard to know, what's the evidence that's being considered? How do people come to these conclusions? And so I want to look at that and give people, the framework so they can engage with it, and they can say, well, hang on, what about this? What about that? And so that's what I'm thinking of doing. Mainly looking at 1 Corinthians 7 and 1 Corinthians 11, because we can actually really mine down into those two chapters. So that's what I'm thinking.
That's awesome.
Yeah, look forward to that.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. And we're going to go ahead and invite our second speaker. Thank you, Eric. And we see you, Lord willing, next month. God bless you guys.
Okay. Goodbye. Great to be with everyone.
Thank you. And we have Pastor Greg.
Hi, can you hear me?
I removed myself. Okay. And
hello, everybody.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you, brother. And what is the topic today?
Well, it's been a reinforced trilogy expanded, master key point 3 and 4 reinforced. And I'm going to talk about Ishmael of the Torah versus Ishmael of the Quran, or I could call it like two Ishmaels.
Okay.
Maybe I could say a little bit more as well, just to introduce.
Sure.
Yeah, so if people are just joining us for this first time, kind of seeing our faces, and there's a whole series that we're going through. So basically, if you're tracking with what we've been presenting the past month or so, this is adding on like supplemental argumentation to points, the core points that we would make in our method, right? So we've talked about Ishmael and Abraham and Ishmael, whether they went down to Mecca and built the Kaaba, and then another point we talked about for Ishmael being whether he is the ancestor of Muhammad, and we've dismantled both those points using the Torah. So this would be supplemental extra stuff related to Ishmael, and it's really quite interesting.
Before we get into the topic, I know I already asked you what the topic is, but I would like to see, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, brother?
Myself?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a pastor in near Toronto in Mississauga, and I'm a church planter as well. I also serve with my denomination with church planting, helping recruit and train church planters. So I've been serving as a pastor for, I think, more than 10 years. Yeah, so I have a passion to reach out to people of other religious communities, especially. I've talked to anybody, really. But in our region, we have a high concentration of Muslims and Sikhs and Hindus. And so part of my passion is to, one, make connections with them and start establishing some of those connections across communities and facilitate connections for our people, the church, and also to equip our people, because really the church, I find, at least in Canada, I mean, I think I could speak beyond that too, but is largely not equipped well when it comes to maybe even evangelism in general, broadly speaking, but also in particular these people groups. So I don't just focus only on reaching out to Muslims or developing ministry in that area, but that is kind of where there's been a lot of doors open the past few years, and yeah, so.
Amen. And Alex, would you tell us a little bit? I know you've been doing outreaches in Toronto to the Muslim community there. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I started reading the Quran in 2001, and since then I have passion to reach out Muslims. I started doing actively reaching out them on the streets of Toronto from 2007 to 2019 because the Big Four pandemic starts. And from 19 to present day, mostly I do online, and also joining with Greg and visiting mosques and talking to Muslims in coffee shops and elsewhere, and having training with various churches how to reach the Muslims as well. So that's in brief.
Thank you so much, guys. And I know we're gonna go back and separate the videos. I know we always have two speakers in the same video, two topics. We're gonna separate them. We're gonna organize them in our YouTube channel to be to be able to find these videos easily. And
Oh, nice.
also, we still need to go back and re-record. I think the third session there was some technical problem. We're gonna go ahead and do that and post it as well. Thank you again, and I'm going to go ahead and which one of you going to start?
I do presentation.
Alex will do the main stuff. I'll just add in some comments here and there for this one.
Okay, both of you are going to be in the screen at the side. Okay.
That'd be great, yeah.
I don't see the PowerPoint yet.
Let me see.
Oops.
Whenever my one of my friends, Joe Boot, he would always make a joke. If he didn't have PowerPoint, he would just say, well, every point of mine is a PowerPoint.
I am so sorry, guys. We did log in earlier today and check, confirm everything is good, but I just...
Did we lose Alex there for a second? Okay.
Yeah.
He's back.
Okay, let me try. I'll start my PowerPoint. All right.
We can fill in some conversation if you need a minute here, Alex.
Wow. I really apologize for
the
problem.
I don't know what happened. Everything was good before. You know how it is. It's always something happens. Yeah, so maybe we could have some conversation if we're waiting. Okay, here he is. Okay. You gonna be good there, Alex?
I have no idea. It's
no idea at this rate.
It's down on me. Something going on. I have my video card. I think is a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, we need a new computer for you, brother.
If I was charismatic, I would blame something else.
I see it here, but I don't see writing in it. Can you go ahead for the first slide?
Looks like it's trying to load.
Okay. I think he froze too.
Oh, yeah. So maybe while we're waiting for him to get it, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Just maybe because I mean I've seen you around online and stuff. I know you've been in these kind of circles for a long time. How long have you been doing ministry in this area for outreach to Muslims?
In the United States, is since June 2001, 3 months before September 11.
Right.
But previously in Sudan, where I was born and grew up.
Okay. Wow. And did you grow up in a Christian family, Muslim family? I don't know your story.
Originally, we were Syrian, came to Sudan as refugees because of the persecution of the Turkish.
Right.
The Turkish occupied Syria. No Muslims would like to use that language. Occupied Syria, occupied by Turkey because they are also Muslims. It's okay to do so. But anyway, they persecuted Christians or nominal Christians, and we ran to Sudan. My grandparents and we were Catholic, and I came to Christ later on through an American organization called SIM, Sudan Intermission. They doing missions in Sudan. But I want to ask you: do you have the same material in your computer? Can you do it from your end? Because I think
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I wouldn't have an update. I don't know. Yeah, he's telling me to start talking. He's having issues with his computer, but I don't know if I have the presentation. And if I were to try to download, let me just check what I have.
yeah, even if he succeeded to log in, I think this is going to be continued problem. He have to deal with his computer, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I apologize for everybody, guys, and
Yeah. Next time we'll make sure I have it as well, just in case.
I
Let me just
know
see
that.
if I can pull. Go ahead.
If you couldn't find number 3, the one for today, if you have number 3, the lesson 3, because his technical problem last time also, and we have to re-record it again. Any of the lessons is fine.
Yeah, my issue is I just need to check. I would need to like look through it a little bit to see if I have the updated versions, because we keep changing it to update it. Yeah, this is the one I have here. Hold on. Let me see.
I know, Karen, my lighting is not good. I'm sorry. I have the beautiful light that me, and I did not turn it on. I'm gonna make sure it's on now. I think it's better now. Let's see. Okay, I think it's better. Thank you, Karen.
You know, I'm just thinking maybe we could just have a conversation more about methodology and stuff like that, because I feel like I could do that on the fly. Whereas I think the other things we would more need a presentation.
We can engage a little bit. I would like to see you are. Do you go where Alex used to set up his table? What do you call that area? It looked like a speaker corner, but
It's called Yonge and Dundas. It's a
okay.
major intersection in Toronto where there's a lot of people that gather for street evangelism or Dawa or whatever religion people are.
You've been with him there?
I met him after he was stopping that, which happened during COVID. So I met him late 2019 in the fall. And he was doing regular debates and like pretty much every weekend in Shabir Ali's masjid with Ijaz Ahmed.
Okay.
And so
I did not realize that Hijaz Ahmed goes to that mosque.
I'll try to refrain saying too much publicly, but so I don't think he does anymore. Okay, I'll just say that. But he used to be there, so I'm not sure where he's at these days. I haven't followed him, so beyond that time, so that was a few years ago. But yeah, I used to go to some of his. They were kind of informal debates that he was doing with him, a series of them back then, and I would go to that. I met a mutual friend introduced us, who's a missionary locally, and he also trains missionaries here. So and once we connected, we realized that we're very like-minded and knew that we could work well together in ministry for connecting with Muslims. And
okay, did you both been in an event where you used that argument with Muslims together?
Okay, so our method. So okay, yes. There's kind of two parts to answering that question. So one is that yes, definitely we participated in many events together. In 2020, we started in the summer of 2020. So after things here, like things was really locked down in Canada, with our beloved dictator. So, so yeah, so in the summer of 2020 was the first time when they like were opening some things up a bit more, and we were connecting with an Ahmadiyya mosque in a
Okay.
nearby city, and we started doing every week. We were there doing what we call dialogue circle, so we would do Quran Bible comparison with them, and we did a long series, 13 weeks in a row, on just the Joseph narrative and Genesis and Surah Yusuf. And we've done over the next couple years, we've done a number of those kind of dialogue series with them. And we've also connected with Sunni mosques in the region and had other kind of groups. So some of these were, sometimes we would do, bigger events, but most of it was like smaller sized circles where we would sit down with them and either address different topics. Sometimes it would be topics that they want to do, not what we want to do. Otherwise, they won't give us the time of day. So, we would kind of, Alex likes to say, eat our vegetables, kind of do the things that they want to do for a little while until we can have an opportunity to do what we want to do.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we've done lots of different kinds of things, but I haven't done street evangelism with him. So
Okay.
he's kind of stopped that since around the time we met.
Okay.
He does online and those kind of things.
Okay. I see Alex with us, but I don't know if are you able to do the PowerPoint?
Give me maybe a few minutes. I have to
Yeah.
load file because I'm using laptop now.
Okay.
So let's talk about it, and then
So-
I'll come back.
Well, maybe you and I could talk while Alex is trying to do it and see
Yeah.
if he can get it working.
Yeah. Let me know when you are ready. Just show
Yes.
me the thumb up.
Yeah. So maybe I could say a little bit about my own experience with it, because it wasn't my methodology, right? Alex developed it.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm getting to when
Yeah.
you meet a Muslim,
Yep.
in the beginning, right away they want to jump on Jesus is not God.
Yeah.
The Bible being corrupted.
Yep.
How do you switch them from all these topics to get control over the track, to get them in that track?
Yeah. Let's talk about that. Maybe we can talk about also other practical aspects of navigating the conversation.
Sure.
So that's the beginning, right? So in Alex's context, where he designed it, and it's helpful to know the kind of where it came out of, and I've been seeking to adapt it differently. So he started it on the streets, where he would set up a table and he would stand behind a table, kind of with books and stuff, Bibles, and people would approach him. So he wasn't taking the posture of going and approaching people. He would wait for people to come to him, right? So that's very different, because the people that will approach you want to talk and they're going to give you more time, rather than interrupting a person as they're walking by and maybe they don't want to stop and talk for a while, right? So the type of people he would talk to are going to give him maybe half hour or maybe more to talk. So he designed his methodology in that context, where he's trying to like very quickly see what he can lay out, but he maybe has half hour, at most maybe an hour, right? So when somebody would approach him, that's usually, to come back to your question, that's essentially what they would approach him with, right? It's a Muslim coming up and saying, okay, explain the Trinity. This doesn't make sense. You got like 3 gods, 1 God, like pick already, right? Or, show me where Jesus said, I am God, worship me, whatever, Ahmadiyya type dawa line they're going to want to use. So how do you navigate that? Well, Alex basically just says, look, before I answer your question, I have a question. Okay. And then, so now so I'll just, this is not actually, it's in my other room, but he would hold up this is a Quran, but he would hold up a Hebrew Old Testament. And, usually I think he has a JPS, is Hebrew and English. And he says, okay, this is a Hebrew Bible, Hebrew Old Testament, a Torah. Do you believe the Hebrew Torah has been changed? Okay, so then they think, I don't know. What do you think they would say in answer to that?
the Bible been corrupted entirely.
Right. But actually, many of them don't say that.
Anything, they will tell me anything disagree with the Quran has been corrupted.
Okay, but in this case, Hebrew Old Testament, because we're not talking about Injil and New Testament,
Okay.
right? Because we're not talking about that, like it's there that they know that there's going to be doctrinal conflicts, right? So they know that if they were to grant that as being uncorrupted, then it's going to contradict the Quran, and then the Quran is going to fall apart, right? So they can't. It has to be corrupted. But if we're talking about like Old Testament, what in the Old Testament contradicts the Quran from
Because
a Muslim's perspective?
Old Testament, they should be also saying Muhammad is coming as a prophet.
Sure. Yep. Okay. But what does the average Muslim think? Like, how do they perceive Old Testament? Because they've never read it, right? All they know really.
If I have
Go
a
ahead.
Bible in my hand, a lot of time they think the Bible, when we say Bible, it means the Injil.
That's right.
Christians.
So that's why we don't say Bible.
Even though the Torah or the Old Testament is included in it, a lot of time I have to explain to them, which is what Samuel usually use, Samuel Green.
Yeah. I've seen Samuel Green go the table of contents thing he did. I like that.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So and actually, so that really illustrates. Look, they have no idea what's in the Bible. Like, unless they're like really top apologists, they maybe have read the Bible. Still, even some of them, I'm not sure. But the point is, they don't know what's in it. They don't know 27 books in the New Testament. They don't know 39 books of the Old Testament. They don't know 5 books of the Torah, right? Yeah. So they
but
just.
What I want to say, the average Muslims, why they will not just bring the argument that the Bible being corrupted to the Torah as well? What's going to stop them from saying just?
Well, we are going to go there, and a lot of people will say that it's corrupted, right? So coming back to the question, do you believe the Torah has been changed? The Hebrew Old Testament, Hebrew Torah has been changed, right?
Originally, they will say originally when it was revealed, it was not corrupted, but later on, yes.
Okay, so I'll just give you this. I'll give you my experience.
That's why Allah have to send the Injil, and then the Injil get corrupted. That's why Allah has to send the Quran.
That's fine.
But He promised He will keep the Quran.
Yeah. So that whole explanation they may be thinking about, but usually when we ask this question, that's not the kind of response we get. So we get the responses we get are either yes, it's been changed, to no, it hasn't been changed. I've had that a number of times now. 3, I'm not sure. And actually, I think a lot of the times is they're not sure. Because we're not talking about Jesus and the New Testament.
If now someone told you it being changed, how you can respond to that?
So it actually doesn't matter how they answer that question. So if they say it, let's say we're going to go forward the same way. Okay. So the second question we asked, first question, do you believe the Hebrew Torah has been changed? Yes, no, maybe. It doesn't matter. If they say yes or maybe, a good case, we'll say, when do you believe it was changed? Before Muhammad or after Muhammad? Okay. Now, if they had said, no, because I've had some people say, recently I had a conversation with somebody who said that I think the text is good, but the teaching is corrupted. And I said, yeah, actually, I agree with you that that's what the Quran teaches, right? But, once we start showing the contradictions between them, right, what are they going to do?
They're going to say the text being corrupted.
Right. So it doesn't really matter what they say at the beginning. We still have to lay out the foundational argumentation to show that what the Quran says about the Torah.
Yeah, but clearly the Quran never says the text being corrupted. It
that's
says
right.
They twist what it means.
That's right.
But in the other passage about, we don't know what it talks about, but it says they write things by their hands and they claim it's from God, but it did not say that about the Torah necessarily.
Yeah, and also that one, so Surah 2, Ayah 79 that you're talking about, if you look at Ayat 75 to 79 closely, it's pretty clear that the timing of it, that this is in the context of the timing of Muhammad. And so if they're writing a book in the time of Muhammad, one, it's so many ambiguities. Which book? Okay. If I write a book, right? So if I have 2 books, if this is the Torah that's already there, and I write this book, and I say this is from God, what happened to the first book?
It's still from God.
Well, if I write this book, there's already a book. Did this book change, the first one?
Yeah.
If I write a book.
No, it does not
Right.
change.
That's right. So writing a book doesn't change the existing books. It's just another book.
Yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't say that they changed the text or tampered with the text. They just wrote another text saying it's from God. So the key thing is, one, it's not even saying they're tampering with it and changing the existing text. Two, it doesn't say that it's the Torah. Okay.
Yeah.
But let's say we grant all of that to them, because if you remember, some of our founding principles is we want to steel man the other side. We don't want to straw man it. So we want to make their side as strong as possible and then aim to refute that. So let's say it is the Torah it's being referred to. Let's even say they change the existing text. It still doesn't matter, because the timing of when it's saying it is in the time of Muhammad, because the Jews are rejecting Muhammad, and that's why they're writing a text. Okay, so the motivation is that. So if it's 7th century, okay, well, we've got the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we've got copies of the Septuagint, which predate that. So even that's the strongest verse they have, right? Everything else is ambiguous or explicitly about teaching as opposed to text.
Yeah.
Right?
But there's so many passages. There are so many passages support the
That's
Torah.
right.
And there's a phrase between what is between his hands, between Muhammad's hands.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that one.
A lot of they change the translation. They will not put between what's between his hands.
So I tried using that pretty early on when I was learning this methodology and trying to internalize it myself and then make it my own. You know, a number of weeks back, I did a presentation on here about the first pillar, which is the Quran affirming the reliability of the Torah in the 7th century. So we went through all these verses, right? You might have noticed I never talked about Baina Yadehi, which is that phrase, between his hands. This is because when I tried that early on, they would just wiggle around that. It wouldn't be persuasive at all. And if you remember, our aim, like in our strategy, is we don't want to just have arguments that are good. We want to have arguments that are persuasive, right? So if we're finding it's not persuasive, then generally we will abandon that argument. Okay, because we can have lots of arguments that are valid arguments and may be persuasive to a Christian. Okay, yeah, no, I can see that, but my question is, like, my only aim is to persuade them, right?
Okay.
So that's why I don't use it, because it doesn't get anywhere, I find.
I am a Muslim. I told you the Torah being corrupted. Where do you take me next?
Yeah. So when do you think it was changed? Before Muhammad or after Muhammad?
Okay. If I said before Muhammad, what are you gonna say?
It actually doesn't matter how you answer the question, because I'm gonna say the same thing. So if it's before or after, all that tells me is kind of probably he's either, if he's hesitant, he's guessing. He doesn't know where I'm going. If he gives me a quick answer and he says before, then that tells me, okay, he's more conversant in Dawa, right? Because he might know where I'm going. So it doesn't matter. Next step is you say before, you say after, or don't know. Most of the time it's I don't know when, because they've just been told that it's been corrupted. They don't know when and they don't know what. So I would just say, okay, can I share some verses from the Quran about the Torah with you?
Okay.
And I mean, what is a Muslim going to say?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of like to explain this as, imagine you were trying to evangelize somebody as a Christian with somebody else, and it's not a Muslim, and that person said, you know, I've been reading the Bible. Can I share some Bible verses with you? Right? And they're not even being mean about it. They're not being, and also the posture we take is we want to be open to correction. If we're shown something that we hadn't considered before, or there's pushback, we want to hear it out. We don't want to be argumentative. Okay? Because we've got so many verses, that can establish this point, I can give up 50% of them, right? So it's
what passages would you take them to right away?
Yeah. So first one I would use is 7:157. Okay, so you know what? I might be able to. I guess we've probably lost Alex for good. At this rate,
He's still in there, but,
or he's in the background. Okay, because I could see if I could. I could probably pull up a handout that I made for a recent conference, and that lists all the verses. I mean, I could do it off the top of my head, but if you want a visual, I could do that.
Sure.
Yeah, so the first one is 7:157, and there it's it's talking about let's see here. It's talking about the unlettered prophet, the unlettered messenger is his and his description are in the Torah and in the gospel. I'm just trying to do this as I'm downloading it. Okay. So basically, we start with a verse or two that would establish that the Quran is saying that the prophecies of Muhammad are in the Torah. Now, we're not going to argue with that point. I'm just going to see if I can. We just want to establish, what does the Quran claim? Okay. Upload. Just give me here 10 seconds. It's up, it should be uploading now. Yeah. So we're just trying to explain, show them, what does the Quran claim? We're not being argumentative. We're just laying out the facts. Because at this point, if the claim of the Quran is that Muhammad's description is in the Torah, even though, of course, we don't agree with that. We know that it's not, right? But the Quran is claiming that it is. So if it's claiming that it is in the Torah in the 7th century, is the Quran saying that, yeah, here we go. Sorry, I don't know if there's a way to, I don't know how clear that is.
No, I don't think you can zoom it, but
can't zoom it. Is
no.
it? Anyway, it lists some of the. You can see at least some of the things. This is just a handout. So, where I would start is 7:157, which gives that verse, and so we're trying to show that, given that the Quran is claiming that it's in there in the 7th century, it's implicitly saying the Torah is reliable. Because if it wasn't reliable and it was corrupted, it wouldn't be saying the description is in there, right? So
what if okay, it being changed after Muhammad?
That's fine.
It being changed later.
Yeah, that's fine because we have manuscripts before. So that's fine.
Oh, okay, because you have Dead Sea Scrolls goes before that time, and it confirms.
So we don't need to argue about that. We don't need to talk about the manuscripts later because we've got the manuscripts before. So that's fine. Like at this point, we're just saying hypothetically, okay, sure, yeah, it could be changed after. But here, what is the Quran actually saying though? The Quran is saying it's there in the 7th century. Okay. Surah 48:29. I really like that one. It gives a long description actually of Muhammad and his companions, and it's like specifically giving this description, how they pray, how they are toward believers and disbelievers, etc. And then it says, and this is how you find their description in the Torah. So the whole like long half of that verse is a very long verse. It says that that's what the description is in the Torah that you'll find, right? So it's very specific. So again, we're not arguing with that. We're just saying that's the claim. It's there. So if it's saying so specific that it's there, it's clearly implying that it is there when the Quran is being revealed, right? And we're just granting the whole standard Islamic narrative about timing, right? We don't argue about the historicity of it. So the second thing we would do is confirmation. So we go from there. So Surah 2, Ayah 40 to 44. Basically it's addressing the children of Israel, and it's saying, I fulfill you the covenant that I established with you, and believe in my revelations, which is the Quran, which confirm the scriptures that beforehand, and don't be the first to deny it. Don't trade it for a fleeting gain, etc. So I'm looking at the handout, so I'm going off the top of my head. But so basically what it's saying there is it says it's confirming the scriptures. It's confirming that which is with you, is what it says. And you can see this in Sahih International, or if you look up the Arabic, it is confirming that which is with you. Looser translations say confirming the previous scriptures, or confirming your scriptures, but it is really that which is with you. So if it's with them, with who? Well, we just walk through exegetically the passage. So who is it addressing? It's children of Israel. When are they? Key question is when. We always ask when. Who is it talking about and when? Because all we needed to say is the 7th century, right? So how do we know it's the 7th century? Well, in verse 41, it's talking about believe in my revelations, which is the Quran, which confirm the scriptures that are with you. So if he's saying believe in the Quran, it's the time of the Quran, right? Yeah. When is the Quran? 7th century. Okay, so this is how we would walk through all of these verses, and it's very simple, factual, and clear exegetical. We're not imposing any ideas in it. We're just unpacking what it's saying. And what I find is when I do this, because it is so obviously that's what it says, right? And I'm not making big claims. I'm not immediately saying, oh, well, that means that it's reliable until today. And no, I'm just saying specifically what is it saying? Muslims, almost all of them, agree at every point along the way.
Okay, where you lay all that ground, when are you going to bring it back to Jesus? Like, when is the conclusion? Like, let's say, okay, we've been talking the last hour, and now I'm leaving. Where you will leave it?
Yeah, so Alex does it on the street in an hour. I can't do it in an hour. Like myself, I'm a thorough person, so I need a sit down conversation with somebody. So that's why I was saying I adapt this approach to the way I do it. So, and I want to be thorough. So, and I don't normally talk to people on the streets. So
That
I set up meetings.
Mostly building that connection, meet with them, follow up. And it seems like to me, it have to be someone that really interested, in order that someone seeking, someone searching.
I mean, it's just somebody who's willing to have a conversation about religion.
It's right? Possible that they're seeking or they want to convert you to Islam.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It really doesn't. In that sense, it really doesn't matter unless it's a person who just like they don't want to talk about religion at all. But then, I mean, that's not really a Muslim because Muslims all want to talk about religion.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very easy to talk to them. You just need to get for me, I don't like to be unnatural. I like it to be a natural connection and organic in the conversation. So how I would do it is basically I'm trying to get to know the person as I would with anybody, right? And hear their story, talk to them. And if there's an opening in that conversation where we've gotten to know each other. I mean, it doesn't have to be the first conversation you're having with somebody, right? I mean, ideally it's not the first conversation. Maybe you have one meeting where you're just getting to know each other, and then the next meeting, you're meeting again to talk more about religion and stuff. So at that point, then I would aim to have a big block of time where it's set apart for us to meet and talk, where I know it's not going to be interrupted. And for me, I need a few hours.
But your ultimate goal accomplishing from showing that the Quran disagree with the Old Testament or the Torah, what is the ultimate thing and what is the next move?
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember. I think we laid out the general big picture, which is good to repeat in how we approach things maybe in our first session. So the first stage is big picture, okay? Dismantling the Quran. So dismantling their authority. Then we relay the Old Testament foundations. which includes original sin, sacrificial system, covenant
And when you say
promises.
dismantling the Quran is by showing it disagree with the Old Testament.
Yes, but we first established that why that would actually dismantle it, right? So it's not simply just saying, oh, there's disagreements, because then if I just say that to a Muslim, there's okay, fine, the Bible's corrupt, right? So we have to first establish, what does the Quran claim about the Torah, which is that it's confirming it, one, with respect to prophecies of Muhammad, but two, and most importantly, with respect to the stories of the prophets, so that the stories should match. Okay, so when we get there, and then we go through all those stories and stuff that we've been laying out the previous number of sessions, that's us now systematically showing them the foundational claims of Islam are not matching with the Torah. The Torah actually dismantles all of it, right? So then after we've dismantled it, that means basically Quran is out of the picture. We've established that it's not true overall. Okay. And now we're not debating about stuff from within the Quran, because that should be done. Okay. Now we need to relay the foundations to get to the gospel without debating about Quranic stuff, because that's out of the picture. So now we're just going to keep using the Torah, a seamless transition, because we've already been using the Torah throughout the conversation, and we start laying systematically and very quickly. It's not like a long conversation at this point. This is much briefer, okay? Where we go back to Genesis 2 and 3, we talk about the fall, we talk about death results from the fall, because in the Quran, death doesn't result from the fall or Adam's disobedience, right? And then we talk about clothing them with the garments of skins, which establishes that there needs to be animal death that symbolically represents death on behalf of them, substitutionary atonement, and the sacrificial system. God establishes that. Leviticus 17:11, God gave blood for the altar as atonement for sin. And then we go through Isaiah 53, which now gets us into messianic promises, his substitutionary death, right? So now that's all Old Testament. And basically that's all we need to do for those foundations. And we're already preaching the gospel from Isaiah 53, right? But for me, I would then add on, if we've got time, the Romans road. Okay. So simple. Now we've already established with Isaiah 53, he's going to die for your sins. And in verse 53, verse 10, it says that he is, and when he offers up his soul, his life, as an asham, which is the Hebrew term for a guilt offering, or it's a specific form of offering for guilt.
Yeah, it's really awesome also because it's showing them. Like usually when I use Old Testament passages with Muslims about Jesus, I always refer to the time frame, like 700 years before Jesus, 1,000 years before Jesus coming to this world.
Yeah.
And it's very, very powerful because they are trying to find something to say that Muhammad mentioned in the Bible. They are begging for something to find, and always every passage they bring, it doesn't work.
Can I make a comment about that, the prophecy of Muhammad? So like to some degree we would be willing to talk about it a little bit, but for the most part we wouldn't argue back and forth about those specific passages, because what we've gone through, if we've gone through the master key, which is those 5 pillars, right? So the third and the fourth are about Abraham and Ishmael, and the fourth in particular is about the ancestry, right? So that Ishmael is the ancestor of Muhammad and the Quraysh tribe. So that we've already dismantled that, because Abraham and Ishmael never went to Mecca, and he wasn't left there abandoned as a baby, etc., right? So that's all undermined. That means Muhammad has no claim to ancestry going back to Ishmael, because Ishmael was never in the region, and he didn't marry an Arab woman, he married an Egyptian. So how can we talk about Deuteronomy 18 being a prophecy of Muhammad? He's not even an Ishmaelite.
Yeah.
Right? So even on the way that they distort the text and abuse it by trying to expand it to apply to Ishmaelites, right? The brothers among your brothers, and they say, well, that can include the Ishmaelites. Okay, let's even grant it to them. Let's say it includes Ishmaelites, but Muhammad's not an Ishmaelite. Okay, so what can they appeal to now? Because I mean, Isaiah 42, Song of Solomon, any Old Testament thing, because we're not even talking about New Testament. Okay, so we don't even need to talk about John 14. So all of these other passages are moot. Like, we don't even need to talk about them because we've already undercut it more deeply at the foundations.
That's really great. Yeah, and that it's all, the hardest part is, I know logically they should move on from the Quran and start taking the Bible
Yep.
serious, because we have copies of the Bible that goes before, like the Dead Sea Scrolls goes 800 years, 700 years before Muhammad, 200 years before Jesus, and that matches what we have. I know it's the Book of Esther is not there, but it doesn't make any big difference for us. Isaiah is there, Psalms is there, and most of all the books, the rest of the books are there, and that matches what we have. And they cannot find Muhammad name in it.
Yeah.
For logically, they should accept that, but it's still they come back to. I am a Muslim. Am born a Muslim. I live a Muslim. I die a Muslim. And it will take a lot of prayers.
Yeah. Okay. So okay, sure. And that's with any approach. But
Yes,
I would say with
definitely.
But what I would say about this is, again, we're not focusing on the prophecies of Muhammad,
Yeah.
right? We're undercutting the foundation, so we don't even need to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, in the second part of the trilogy, which is the Global Torah Change Conspiracy Theory, it's a funny name, but that actually gets into the prophecies of Muhammad, and that's another thing we'll come to. But this primary aspect of the approach is actually comparing the narratives.
Yeah.
And why this is really significant is because we're giving them a whole bunch of issues. It's not just one or two things. It's all of these inconsistencies, contradictions between the narratives. And those contradictions are not theological in nature, and they're not ethical in nature. This is the key thing to understand. Because when they think about the Bible being corrupt, okay, they're thinking about doctrinal issues. The Christians changed the New Testament because they wanted to make Jesus, turn him into a god. Or they had this weird idea about the Trinity, or, whatever, right? So, but those are doctrinal issues. But what is the doctrinal issue when, you think of the narrative with Yusuf? When Joseph has his dream in the Quran, in Surah 12, ayah 4 and 5, right? He has a dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars. He tells, do you remember who he tells? Because I don't think we covered the full story in our previous presentations. I'll give you a different example than was given. Do you remember the narrative in the Quran?
No, go ahead.
Okay. In Genesis, who does he tell his dreams to? Do you remember?
His father and his brothers?
His father and his brothers, the second dream. So he has two dreams in Genesis. The sheaves of wheat, which represent his brothers, bowing down to his sheaf.
Yeah.
And he tells his brothers. And his brothers get upset. What are we going to bow down and serve you? Then he has the second dream, which is like it, which is sun, moon, 11 stars. And he tells his brothers again. And then a second time he tells the dream to his father with his brothers.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Jacob rebukes him. So harsh correction. And he says the same, what are we going to bow down and serve you? Right? So just take that little piece in the narrative and compare it with the Quran. I'll read the verses for you. Okay. And you can do this all throughout the narrative. Okay. So ayah 4 and 5, it says, this is the beginning of the Joseph narrative in the Quran. Remember when Joseph said to his father, "Oh, my dear father, indeed I dreamt of 11 stars and the sun and the moon. I saw them prostrating to me." So who does he tell? "Oh, my dear father."
His father only.
Okay. So Joseph tells his father, Jacob, the dream. Then he, that's Jacob, replied, "Oh, my dear son, do not relate your vision to your brothers." Don't tell your brothers. "Or they will devise a plot against you. Surely Satan is a sworn enemy to humankind." Okay, and if you keep going through the narrative, he never tells his brothers. So in Genesis, he has two dreams Quran has one dream. Now that's not a contradiction because it's just an omission, right? We want a contradiction. It's a difference to the number, but it's not a contradiction. Maybe it's just not including it, right? So, but in both dreams in Genesis, he tells his brothers, right?
Yeah.
And in Genesis, when he tells the dream of the sun, moon, and 11 stars he tells his brothers first, and then he tells it again to his brothers with his father. Okay. So now tell me, why would the Jews have an original Quranic version of the story, maybe before the Dead Sea Scrolls, maybe at whatever points you want to put it in history, okay? And then they decided they're going to change that story, okay? Because it's too big of a change for it to be unintentional, like a mistake.
Okay.
There's too many things to change. It's not like a slip of the pen, or they copied an extra word, or they skipped a line. Okay, typical textual critical mistakes, okay, that are unintentional. If it's an intentional mistake, it has to have a motivation. So what is the motivation to change that? Is
There's
it
no-
theology or ethical?
Yeah, you would think if there's any change, the change would be that they bowing down to him, but that's found in the Quran as well. Because maybe if the bowing part was not there, they would say, see, because bowing down is only to God or something like that. But that should be that if there's a differences and the Quran is right and the Bible being corrupted in their theory, in their mind, it should be that. It should be that. But that's not there.
You know what's funny? That
Yeah.
you know where the difference comes from?
From.
So in this narrative, we know where it comes from. It comes from Jewish Midrash.
Oh, wow.
So the difference, and this is something that I don't think anybody has noticed in this occasion, but if you compare it, we've gone through Louis Ginsburg's Legends of the Jews, which gives, like, it's a summary compilation going through all the different Midrashim, the Jewish legends, and it retells it in a narrative form.
Wow.
So you can look up Joseph. All of the differences, I would challenge you, when you're looking at the stories in the Quran, compare it with the biblical accounts, and then check the Midrash whenever there's a difference. Because what we're finding is that is where it is.
Yeah, awesome.
What the Quran really is mainly legends from the Jews, and mainly Jewish legends, not other legends.
Yeah, this is a very good point. There's a book by Michael Huffman. Michael Huffman, he wrote a lot of things against the Talmud. He exposing a lot of bad teaching in the Talmud. And his books are not allowed to be sold in Amazon or many other places. But I recommend that book, not for the purposes necessarily that he writing that books about, but when you see the Talmud, all the evil stuff in the Quran, women are property, and all the stuff is found in the Talmud, most of it. And we are working on this project now that we're going, because he drew our attention to all these things in the Talmud, but because we know what the Quran teaches now, and Hadith, now we can see, oh wow, that's where Muhammad taken it from. Very, very powerful. And also like the idea of Satan. That's actually from the book of Adam, that Satan became Satan because God ordered the angels to bow down to Adam. So many things.
Actually, it's constant. There's so much midrash that, you know what, I mean, you've been in around these circles for so long, so you know all the arguments, right? So when Christians bring up legends that are in the Quran, it's always the same ones, right? It's always the one with like Cain and Abel, or, you know, you could go through the Abraham smashing the idols, right? So those are all typical midrash. Or they talk about the New Testament apocryphal things, right? With Jesus making the clay bird and those kind of things, or dual carnate. So those are, it's always the same ones, or the sleepers. But what's really fascinating is that there's actually so much more, and some of the things are very subtle. So unless you were looking at the details in the narratives and comparing them both, right, the Quranic narrative to the biblical, the Old Testament narratives, and then seeing the differences and then looking it up, right, you wouldn't see it. Because like there are some that are like more overt or flashy, like You know the cutting of the hands narrative? Do you know that one?
No.
Okay,
About
I'm gonna
where
read it to you.
did get the idea of cutting hands from?
No. I'll read it to you. It's in the Joseph story
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
with the women that cut their hands. Okay, so yeah, you could if you want to open your Quran too, but it's in so it's in Surah 12. So actually, to preface it, do you know do you know the Quranic version of the story of the seduction of Joseph by Potiphar's wife?
Um, I don't really. I usually skip a lot of time
No,
the
I
stories.
know. And actually,
It's
so this
kind
is
of
the thing is
boring.
a lot of people are skipping it,
Yeah.
but there's actually it's so powerful when you know that if you use this not from a doctrinal debate issue, right? If you're comparing the details and thinking about that point.
I like that. This is a really good point because there's no motives behind it to be changed. If it
And
was
there's way too
fear
many.
or
It's not like one or two, because Alex has found like 500.
yeah.
Right?
And with Christianity, they're going to say, oh, you believe in three gods, the Trinity, they're going to stuck there.
Right.
But now when you're approaching them using the Old Testament, they always, in all this MSA, Muslim Student Association interface dialogues, they always bring a Jewish person with them because they support their position for them that God is only one. And they always bring them to be part of the discussion in order to show, Muslims and Jews are in unity, that God is only one, and the Christians believe in Father, Son, Holy Spirit. They always use that for their side, but now we can use it to turn it around against them as well.
So can I read you the story?
Sure.
Okay. Story time. Okay. Okay. So in Surah 12, I'm just going to start with a seduction scene because it's fun. So 23, or 21. The man of Egypt, that's Al-Aziz. So he's not called Potiphar, so it's also the wrong name. So he bought him. Who bought him said to his wife, "Take good care of him. Perhaps he may become useful to us, or we may adopt him as a son." Okay, is there any adoption idea by Potiphar?
No.
Guess where that's from?
From where?
Midrash.
Oh, okay.
Okay. This is how we established Joseph in the land, so that we might teach him the interpretation of dreams, which, by the way, this is because he's a child. He's a young child in the Quran when he goes to Egypt and is sold into slavery. But in Genesis, at the beginning of Genesis 37, just before he has the dreams, it says he's 17 years old. Okay. And it says, verse 22, and when he reached maturity, so he was already mature in Genesis, but now he's reaching maturity after he's already in Egypt. Okay. We gave him wisdom and knowledge, etc. So to verse 23, and the lady in whose house he lived tried to seduce him. She locked the doors firmly and said, "Come to me." He replied, "God is my refuge. It is not right to betray my master who has taken good care of me. Indeed, the wrongdoers never succeed." She advanced towards him, and he would have done likewise had he not seen a sign from his Lord. So he would have given into the temptation if God hadn't given him some miraculous sign. Is that what happens in Genesis?
No.
Okay, but that's also in the Midrash.
Okay.
He sees like an image of I think it's his father and his mother. It's like a reminder, oh, shoot, okay, I won't do it. Okay. This is how we kept evil and indecency away from him, for he was truly one of our chosen servants. They raced for the door, and she tore his shirt from the back. She tore his shirt. Does his shirt get torn in Genesis?
No.
No. Like there's a piece of his clothing or his clothing comes off, but it doesn't tear, right? So tore from the back, only to find her husband. So they're racing to the door. Shirt tears from the back, only to find her husband at the door. So her husband is at the door. They're running together. They get to the door, and her husband is there on the other side. Is that what happens in Genesis?
No.
No, so he runs away, right? And then she's waiting for him to come home to show the proof with the garment. And then in Genesis, does he have a defense?
No, is that all information also from the Midrash?
Yeah, the tearing of the garment.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is, so it says tears from the back, right? Let me just read the next couple verses to explain it. So she cried, "What is the penalty for someone who tried to violate your wife, except imprisonment or a painful punishment?" Joseph responded, "It was she who tried to seduce me." So he's defending himself, right? Into the Quran. He's there talking to Aziz or Potiphar. And a witness, listen to this, and a witness from her own family testified. So there's a witness, an eyewitness to the event. If his shirt, the witness says, if his shirt is torn from the front, then she has told the truth and he is a liar. But if it is torn from the back, then she has lied and he is truthful. So it's kind of like, if it's torn from the front, then she's told the truth. He's tried to seduce her because he's trying to advance, and she tears his shirt from the front. But he's telling the truth. It's from the back because he's trying to get away, and she tears him, trying to pull him. Right? That's the idea. So when her husband saw that Joseph's shirt was torn from the back, he said to her, "This must be an example of the cunning of you women. Indeed, your cunning is so shrewd. O Joseph, forget about this. And you, O wife, seek forgiveness for your sin. It certainly has been your fault."
Then they did not imprison him or anything.
He does get to prison.
Why?
So you have to keep reading. It doesn't make sense, but okay. But there's another episode. The next scene is a whole inserted scene that's not in the Torah. Okay, so then Potiphar's wife, so in Jewish tradition she's called Zuleika. Zuleika then hosts a banquet, because basically she's now the object of ridicule, of rumors, because the people in the town hear that she tried to seduce her servant. So she's like, okay, how do I get rid of this shame? So she holds a banquet, and she basically invites all the women to the banquet and has Joseph come to be the server at the banquet so they can see him. And because I know this is funny. So because he is so attractive, he's so like hot, that they like they're holding, it says, knives in their hands, and it says they see him and they say, basically, OMG, he's not a man, he's an angel, and they cut their hands. Okay.
Wow.
And so basically at the end of it, it's sort of convoluted, like how he gets into prison, but basically it's sort of like, it sounds like she says to the other woman, "See, this is what I've been dealing with, right? You would have done likewise, wouldn't you? He's so attractive. How could you resist? And he keeps resisting me. Like, this is why I'm struggling so much." So, and then it almost sounds like they all want to seduce him now. And so the only way he's going to get out of this is if he gets saved by basically being sent to prison. Okay.
Wow.
But what's so interesting, okay, there's actually a lot that can be said about this, but I'll just say a couple things. So that scene is from Midrash, and it's much longer, the account in the Midrash, because the Quran takes from Midrash, but it gives a shorter account. You'll notice that's what it does with biblical accounts. It shortens it. They only give some of the information. It leaves many things out. But the Bible's much bigger than the biblical sources, are typically much bigger than the Quran. And then the Midrash is that much bigger than the biblical account in all of its legends. So it's funny when you talk to Muslims about the comparison of the stories. Some of them will say, "Oh, well, that's what's so nice about the Quran. It only gives you what you need, right? Okay, it leaves all the other things out, so it only gives you the essentials." Well, that's kind of interesting, because why does it insert a whole story that's not in the Torah? if it's only going to select the most important things or the things that are practically relevant or whatever it is that gives you lessons, why is it inserting legends that were never in the Torah? Okay, that were also not in the scriptures, which in the last ayah of the same surah, verse 111, it says that the Quran is a confirmation of the previous scriptures with respect to the stories of the messengers, right? And a detailed explanation of all things. So why is it when we compare the stories, they don't match in the details, and you add in things because it's confirming stories that are in the scriptures, right? But these stories were never in the scriptures. They were stories outside of them. So why does it have these stories in them? It's not saying it confirms legends, it's saying it's confirming the scriptures.
Yeah.
Right? And even Muhammad, like, let's, obviously him or whoever's behind the actual writing of the Quran or authorship of the Quran, he messed it up, even with the Midrash. So when you compare the details in the Quran with the details in the Midrash, it also contradicts the Midrash. So, the tearing of the garment, it said he tore it from the back, she tore it from the back of Joseph, right? And that's what exonerated him. That's why he's innocent. Guess what? In the Midrash, it's flipped. So what will show he's innocent is if it's from the tears from the front in the Midrash.
Why?
Okay. And the back will show that he's guilty. So what it gives us, it's interesting. In the Jewish legend, it says that Zuleika is trying to seduce him, and she pulls him in like front to front, and he's trying to pull away, and she sticks like a knife or dagger under his shirt, and as he's pulling away, it rips. Okay. So isn't it fascinating that the tearing of the garment and the focus on the front or the back is in both accounts, the Quran and the Midrash? Nothing like that is in Genesis. And Muhammad gets it mixed up, even with the Midrashic account. And you remember it said there was an eyewitness, right, in the Quran? The eyewitness of the account. It doesn't say who the eyewitness is in the Quran. It's just an unnamed eyewitness from the family. But guess what the Midrash says the eyewitness is? It's Potiphar and Zuleika's baby. So the baby speaks from the cradle
again
in the Midrash.
Okay.
And
Muhammad took that and make it Jesus is speaking from the cradle.
Okay, so this is really interesting. I'm going to see if I can find the list while we're talking. But I started making a list of all the babies that speak in Midrash.
Wow.
There's a whole list. Babies. Here it is. I'll list them, okay? Noah. Noah, when he was a baby, he spoke, praising God when he was born. Abraham, at 10 days old, after growing up supernaturally fast, like he grows up like almost instantaneously. Okay. And he grows up supernaturally fast from, this is just so crazy. I'm just reading my notes on it. They're brief. So he at 10 days old, he speaks after growing up supernaturally fast from drinking milk. Milk, no, it's not even, okay. Milk that Gabriel caused to flow out of Abraham's own finger.
Wow.
So Abraham is drinking milk out of his own finger that Gabriel made to come out of Abraham's finger. And that's how he grew up supernaturally fast, because he was abandoned in a cave as a baby. Okay. Wow. And then it says he went out of the cave and observed the celestial bodies and reasoned and concluded that monotheism is true.
Wow.
And guess what? That latter story, that's in the Quran.
Wow.
He looks up at the stars and he thinks, oh, is that God? No, that's not God, right? You remember that story's in the Quran.
Yeah.
So that's from the Midrash. Again, you got a speaking baby Abraham. the third one is the one we were mentioning in Zuleika and Potiphar's child. So I have a couple of notes here on that. So that child was 11 months old. He was the witness to Zuleika seducing Joseph, and interceded to report Zuleika's guilt and Joseph's innocence while men were beating Joseph. Okay. Moses also spoke when he was 1 day old. Samuel, it says not quite a baby, but at 2 years old, he was already in possession of, in quotes, learning and acumen, such that in Shiloh, he, in quotes, instructed the attendants looking for a priest to perform the sacrifice, that he instructed the priest that a non-priest was permitted to kill the sacrifice. Okay, he was 2 years old.
It seems
Also,
to me,
also Jeremiah is another example.
yeah, it seems to me, Muhammad, he was listening to so many people. They have no electricity, and they just sit down, hang out with people as
Yeah,
and they just hearing, because they were dealing with a lot of caravans and business people and people coming from all across, and he would just listen and hear, and he will
Yeah.
adapt things, but he was not taking notes. He mixed up all of the stories as well.
what I would say though, and what Alex and I are really seeing is, what we really firmly believe now is that Islam is not how it originated. It wasn't really primarily a heretical sect of Christianity. It was really a heretical sect of rabbinical Judaism.
I have a friend that he really believed that as well. And the name of the book, it's called Judaism's Strange Gods by Michael A. Huffman II.
Okay.
It's a great book to have, especially if you are at this point. I really think this is.
Yeah, I'd love to read that. I gotta have to get them from you.
It's a huge book. It's a big book that packed. Every page you're gonna read in this book, you're gonna say, "Wow, that's where Muhammad took it from." Well, that's what Muhammad. And the good part that we want to accomplish using this material is the main purpose is to the hadith, especially so much hatred against the Jews. Muslims, we see what across the world today happening. They want to remove the Jews from the face of the earth, but they need to know that their prophet took everything from the Talmud that belonged to the Jews.
So I could share my theory about kind of what's behind that from what I'm seeing in the Quran and considering it in light of all this stuff. So I try to approach it very charitably in my interpretation, like as well, like not trying to impugn motives when I don't have to, right? And I think as Christians we can tend toward like being on a fault finding mission and try to read things uncharitably. So I try to avoid that as much as possible. But what I would say is what I see, like, to be fair, what I see the Quran saying, and I think it's obviously, I think it's wrong in many ways about this, what it teaches here. But when it's talking about opposition to Jews or, condemnation of Jews, I don't think it is primarily anti-Semitic about it. I think what it's saying is, I think what Muhammad was upset about was the Jews thought they were special and that they're the chosen people. And that, look, here he is, a monotheist. We're both monotheists, aren't we? You Jews and me. And let's do away with the pagan idolatry and stuff like that, right? But the Jews don't accept him as a prophet, right? Understandably.
Yeah, of
right?
course, he was disappointed that they refused to accept him.
Yeah, and the emphasis and the explanation, what I've seen is that the Islamic explanation is the Jews rejected Muhammad because he wasn't a Jew.
Yeah.
Right. So, if you look at, for example, in Surah 2, 89 to 91, which is a passage we use in the first pillar to establish the Torah in the 7th century, I walked through that carefully and basically explain in 89, it's basically saying that Jews in the time of Muhammad were waiting for the prophecies of Muhammad in the Torah to be fulfilled. And of course, we know they are not there, but the Quran's claiming that they're there. And so the perspective of the author of the Quran is he's saying, look, they're under judgment because they're not willing to believe their own scriptures, which testify to me, right? And the verse 90, and so even though they recognize him, they reject it, is what it says in 89. And so therefore they're under judgment, it's saying. 90, it says they basically reject him. This is according to Tafsir. It's not as clear when you're reading the verse. The Tafsir basically says that they reject him because they're envious of him, because he's not a Jew. And they're upset that God would choose anybody that he wills, even a non-Jew. And 91 is saying, well, like, why don't you accept the Quran? And the Jews are saying, well, we don't we already got a book. We don't need your book. We'll just follow our own scriptures that we already have. And then Allah is saying, well, that doesn't make any sense because the Quran is confirming your scriptures, right? And they're saying, no, we'll just follow our scriptures. So this is kind of like us as Christians. We would look at rabbinical Jews who don't accept Jesus the Messiah, and we would say, well, why don't you accept Jesus the Messiah? He's obviously fulfilling Isaiah 53, etc., right? There's prophecies in there that talk about him, and yet you're rejecting him. Then they'll say, well, no, we'll believe our scriptures. Or our point is, well, yeah, if you really believe them, that's what it teaches. So the claim of the Quran is that Muhammad is in the Torah, and they're being dishonest and deceitful by saying he's not in there.
But
and that's
Muhammad
why they're being condemned.
But Muhammad is wrong. Muhammad.
I know he's wrong.
Yeah.
But does he know that he's wrong?
What do you mean? Does Muhammad know he's wrong?
Right, because if he couldn't read it, who was he going
by? Really believed that he was a prophet?
I think he could have, because he could have. I mean, after all, like from our perspective, we would probably read some of the accounts that sound like demonic influence, right?
Demonic influence. Okay.
So if there was a like let's suppose those narratives are preserved historical information, right? So the way we would interpret that would be there's some sort of spiritual influence. So if there is a spiritual reality to that, then somebody could be convinced through a demonic influence that it is genuine and from God, right?
Okay.
So I don't know. I'm not sure, right? But like we're speculating somewhat. But yeah, so I would say why they're being condemned in the Quran is because, I mean, according to the teaching of the Quran, whatever Muhammad actually thought, right? But what I see exegetically with what the Quran is saying is that the Jews were condemned because they weren't willing to follow the teachings of their own scriptures, which pointed to the Quran and Muhammad.
But also
so they're being disobedient.
Because they believe that Allah has a son, Azra, the son of God, as well. That's
okay, my theory about that actually is I think that typically, it's so obvious that, okay, where do they teach that, right? That's our initial reaction everybody has.
Is that in the Midrasha?
I've searched. I can't find it. But if I find it, I will be the first to tell you.
Because I ask so many rabbis about that, and they say they have no clue what he's talking about.
So this is but the verse also says that they're elevating their rabbis, and the Christians elevate their priests, right? So what I think it's what the Quran is really saying is not that Jews necessarily said that phrase about Ezra. It's that they're functionally treating him that way, right?
Like if he is the son of Allah.
Like as if he is a son of God, or he is like semi-divine. What's so fascinating is actually if you read Louis Ginsburg, at the section he has on Moses, at the very, very end of the section on Moses, if you can look for it, it says it concludes the section on Moses saying that Moses is half God. Half God. So
in what book is that?
Ginsberg's Legends of the Jews.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So that means that there are traditions that basically semi-divinize Moses. So is there, okay, so let's kind of use an analogy in the Quran about Mary, right? So, you know, there's debate about this whole thing. How does the Quran see the Trinity, right? What are the three things that it's referring to, you know? And but when it's talking about like taking Mary or divinizing Mary or worshiping Mary, whether or not that's part of the three or not, it's saying that Christians were worshiping Mary. Now, I've heard some Christian apologists try to say, well, no, they don't. I said, well, what are you talking about? There are Christians that worship Mary, right? So they elevate her too much. And do you think that a Muslim or somebody like Muhammad might have looked at what the Christians were doing with Mary and said, that's idolatry? Because we would say that, right? Even though technically with the way they articulate their doctrine, they're not going to say she's God, okay? But functionally, practically, they have elevated her that way, right? So what I would say about the Ezra son of God thing is I think it's a practical thing, not a theological thing. They're treating him, they're elevating him because he's like the ultimate teacher of the Torah in that time. And how do the Jews view the Torah? Very highly.
The only problem was that what you're saying, because they're saying the Christians saying that Jesus, Son of God, and then the Jews they put it side by side.
Okay. Yes, but okay. So yeah, I get your point. Fair point. But at the same time, does the Quran understand the Christian position on Jesus?
That we do believe that he is Son of God. Yes, we do
and
believe.
No. But do they understand? Does it understand divine sonship accurately?
No, they think that we're saying Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Father, Son, and Mother.
Okay, so my point is, I could easily say that it's just misunderstanding. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Muhammad mixed all these theologies and stuff like that. But I would love to see if there's a record of that, and there's a possibility that he, as you said as well, that's one of the. It could be one of the interpretations for it. We went way over.
Oh, I went out looking at the time. Talking.
But thank you so much. This is great information, and Lord willing, I'm going to talk to Alex and see maybe we can do pre-recording for the last one and this one, and we can have it live online after that.
I unfortunately won't be able to join you next weekend because I'm away at a retreat.
No problem.
What I would maybe just say is there is so much stuff to study in this area and to lay out. We have actually so much content that we can walk through.
I like that. Yeah. I like that the idea that there's no motives to change. More changes, it does not benefit anyone. Why anyone will take the time to the Jews are very careful in making copy to copy the Bible. Right. So counting the words and all that, and they will come and change God's words and things does not benefit them with anything. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and the Midrash supports the reliability of the text because they wrote the legends outside the text. They didn't tamper with the stories in the text.
Yeah.
Because the only way that they could reinterpret it was writing outside the text, which means that implies they're not willing to tamper with it, even though they create all these fanciful ideas in the stories.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, brother. And thank you.
There's Alex.
I'm sorry, Alex, for the technical problem. Let's talk tomorrow if it's possible, and we can see if we can do some recording during the week, and we put it back again. But definitely, you need a new laptop, brother. Thank you so much.
Maybe Alex can share my email with you, and we can communicate and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, George.
Thank you. God bless you. Thank you, everybody. And I'm sorry for the technical problems. And see you next week with Dr. Eddie Dalcour. God bless you guys. Bye-bye.